Thank you, Robin, and thanks to all of you who are spending your Sunday morning. Who are spending your Sunday morning with us, and because it's important to you to be here on a Sunday morning, Elizabeth and I want to allow plenty of time for you to engage with her, as well as for me to ask a few questions. So please start thinking about what you would like to ask. This is not going to be one of those sessions where it runs over and then somebody gets to ask one question. Okay, we're not going to do that. Now, Elizabeth, we've just met.
Yes.
And in reading your book, you know, and your other work, it's clear that you find in creativity, art, and history a zone of hope. And words are a big zone of hope. That's your work. So I happen to know that Mavis Staples asked you to write songs with her. And I want to take this personal opportunity to say that I haven't heard any songs written by you and Mavis Staples, and I want to encourage you to revisit that request. And when all of you see her after this session, you know what to do.
And I cannot believe you know that.
Yes,
and
I
actually,
do.
It's very powerful that I interviewed Mavis Staples in New Haven, Connecticut at the International Festival of Arts and Ideas, one of the very, very great things of my life. And she was Mavis, and she was extraordinary, and she was wonderful. And it was not long after President Obama's election. And so as a Chicagoan, she talked about, she said when the election finally came and everyone was in Grant Park, she stayed very, very quiet in her house. She couldn't believe that it was happening. And then she said, the president walks like Sam Cooke. I thought you wanted to know that. She said, and she was absolutely amazing. And afterwards she said that, and I didn't know she meant it. So
I don't think she says anything she doesn't mean.
Oh, okay. I think I couldn't believe it. So now we have a project. Okay.
All right, everybody. Okay. Now back to the book. Would you launch us by reading something for us?
Yes. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for coming. And I got the jackpot for my interlocutor, so I'm very, very happy about that as well. So this is a book in overview that is catalyzed by the crisis that we're in right now. What about the continual race-based violence that we and our young people, that Black and brown young people in particular, are witnessing over and over and over and over again, relentlessly, on their telephones, out of the presence of loved ones? It doesn't stop. Each one is worse than the next. And I'll call the name here of the young man who was voguing to Beyonce in a gas station in Brooklyn, New York, and was murdered for being himself in a moment of Black cultural expression, no less, right? But here also talking about the Dante Wrights, the Trayvon Martins, the Tamir Rice, the litany goes on and on and on and on and on. So we've got to think about this traumatized generation, and I don't say that lightly, this traumatized generation of our young people. I connect it to the overall question of Black dehumanization in Confederate monuments, in other kinds of ideologies that deny our humanity. And when you deny the humanity of people and describe them as less than human, it is easier to harm them. That is a precondition for harm. And so my offering is art, culture, history, critical thinking as a way of understanding the moment we're in, always with hope, but not with sunny hope, right? With more of a kind of necessary, despairing hope. So this short section is called Whether the Negro Sheds Tears. On April 3rd, 1905, a researcher named Alvin Borquist at Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts, wrote to the preeminent scholar, activist, writer, theorist, and chronicler of race, W.E.B. Du Bois, at his academic home of Atlanta University. Borquist wrote, "Dear Sir, we are pursuing an investigation here on the subject of crying as an expression of the emotions, and should like very much to learn about its particularities among the colored people. We have been referred to you as a person competent to give us information upon the subject. We desire especially to know about the following salient aspects. 1, whether the Negro sheds tears. 2, if so, under what general conditions, anger, fear, shame, pain, sorrows, etc. 3, as regards any particularities in vocalization." And it goes on very sincerely, Alvin Borquist. Black people were, to this researcher, not understood to do something as fundamentally human as cry. The query was a question: does the Negro shed tears? Think of the first sign that marks human beings as human and alive, a baby's cry at birth. Think of crying and all that it expresses and carries, and crying as fundamentally involuntary human expression, like laughter. The research wanted to know if Black people cried, which in essence means, as a query to Du Bois, do you and your people feel? Are you human? Are Black people human? Do Black people do what people do? Are Black people people? If Black people are not people and do not cry, then they do not experience pain or grief or trauma or shock or sorrow. If Black people do not experience pain or grief or trauma or shock or sorrow, are they human? And if they are not human, can their continued violation be justified? Can Black people be harmed if they cannot cry to say so? Du Bois replied to Borquist a few days later in a letter that is a list poem unto itself. The first line simply reads, "The Negro sheds tears." We, Black people, are made mostly of water, blood, and tears. Our black, gold, brown, sienna, blue, black, yellow, yellow, cream, umber, chocolate sand, wet sand, beige, acorn, black skin contains those waters. We bleed, we shed oceans of tears. Our waters contain our sorrows. Almost a year after George Floyd was killed, I watched the trial of Derek Chauvin, the former police officer who killed him by kneeling on his neck for over 9 minutes. Again, as with the video, I want to turn away, but I cannot turn away because I feel I have to witness. A pulmonologist named Dr. Martin J. Tobin, testifying for the prosecution, takes us quietly and inexorably through a meticulous, close read of the video of the killing, noting details such as this: Floyd's boot toe off the ground means half of Chauvin's weight, 86.9 pounds, is being pressed into Floyd's neck. He shows us Floyd fighting for breath with every fiber of his being, illuminating the efforts made with any slightly liberated body part to move, to create an airway. When Floyd braces his knuckles on the ground, Dr. Tobin says, "This shows us he has used up all his resources and showed he is trying to breathe with his fingers and knuckles." He tells us the precise second, 5 minutes and 3 seconds in, that Floyd has suffered a catastrophic brain injury. The kneeling on the neck continues for long minutes after that. Then Dr. Tobin shows us the exact moment of Floyd's death. 1 second, he's alive, and 1 second, he's no longer. That's the moment that life goes out of his body. Charles McMillian, a neighborhood elder at 61, weeps on the stand and cannot stop. "I feel helpless. I don't have a mama either. I understand him." George Floyd's brother, Phil O'Nees, cries on the stand when shown a photograph of himself as a child with his older brother, George. He says, "George was a big mama's boy. I cry a lot, but George, he loved his mom. He showed us how to treat our mom, how to respect our mom. He loved her so dearly." All the Black men at this trial seem to cry, and the young people say they should have done something to stop it. The young man at the store who was the cashier for Floyd's transaction wishes he hadn't questioned the counterfeit bill. Black people, including unimaginably brave Darnella Frazier, say, "I should have intervened. I should have stopped it." The young people assume responsibility for the horror they could not prevent. George Floyd cried for his mother as he died. I see Black elders cry watching this trial. I see my father cry watching this trial. As millions waited for the verdict in the Chauvin trial, police killed a 16-year-old girl in Columbus, Ohio, Ma'Khia Bryant. In tears our sorrow, in tears our grief, in tears our anger, in tears our rage. In tears swallowed our cancer, hypertension, respiratory ailments. In tears swallowed is dis-ease. In tears shed is sometimes no relief on the other side. Black tears unshed and swallowed every day, and black tears shed.
Elizabeth, I avoided this book for a long time because I have a son. And so I only read it for this occasion, and I'm very glad I did. I see the book in 3 parts. In the first section of the book, it seems to me you're setting the table, and the part that you just read is part of setting the table for a serious conversation. Setting the table, I mean, you're showing us how you see the world. And it is very direct, sparse, but also nuanced. And then it's not till the middle of the book, as I read it, that you ask the serious question that you want us to think about. And that is, you ask yourself, do I really believe that cultural expression can somehow shape a world where our children are safe? And the rest of the book is you having a conversation with yourself about whether you really believe that. And this is about belief in really your life's work and who you are. So in setting the table, as in the rest of the book, you know, these words are very sparse. They are the words of a poet. Every word, there's no wasted language in this book. It's so powerful. And you ask us to really pay attention. You launch, I think it's in the first or second sentence, you launch us into talking about not racism, but white supremacy. And you confront it head on, and you ask the reader to do that with you. And then there's this stunning statement, which is a part of what you've just shared. This is a quote: Black parents live with the truth that we cannot fully protect our children. And then you observe this generation is more vulnerable and more traumatized than the last. That's why I avoided this book. Would you say more about what you want the readers to understand about those assertions?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, you identified in that sentence, you know, do I really believe that? I mean, that was the sticking point in writing the book. Because I thought, well, this is what I got, you know, this is what I've always had as an educator for decades and decades and decades and decades. I have seen the real empowerment and transformation. I do believe in the empowerment and transformation that occurs in, you know, mixed classrooms where people learn the truth, right? So not just the kind of freedom of imagination that art and culture give us, but also the truth that critical scholarship gives us. I mean, and why there's, you know, a long section about monuments and about Stone Mountain. And that sort of dovetails with some of our work at the Mellon Foundation, where we have a big monuments project, and people say, oh, well, you know, taking down all this history, we need to have, you know, the truth of history. I said, but the Confederates actually are a lie of history, that it's not truthful. Most of these monuments were put up long after they lost the Civil War, and many were stripped of their citizenships. They are put in heroic stances, and they failed at war. They failed in their mission, right? So actually, that's not true. These statues want you to think something else. What does it mean when a Confederate statue is put up in the 20th century, when it's put up someplace where the Civil War was never fought or Robert Lee never was? It's put up as a symbol and a magnet for white supremacy. I mean, that's what it is, and we have to call it. And also, as I do in the book, say, and here, white people, I am talking to you. Because I got what I got, black folks, we got what we got, but, where did white supremacy come from? It is not something that it is within the power of black people to fix. So what does it mean for everybody to join in wanting a more truthful story of our history and who we are? I think, so my own sons are 23 and 25. Some friends here have known them since they were born and love them since they were born. And I love not only my own young people, but I love their friends and I love the students I've taught. And I think I take very much, and some of this is in the book as well, Gwendolyn Brooks' concept that there is no such thing as other people's children. That we have to love and be responsible for as many of our children as we can. I am just quite certain. I mean, again, I said it better here, and just to read a small snippet to what they've witnessed. This one was shot in his grandmother's yard. This one was carrying a bag of Skittles. This one was playing with a toy gun in front of a gazebo. Black girl in bright bikini. Black boy holding cell phone. This one danced like a marionette as he was shot down in a Chicago intersection. The words, the names, Trayvon, Laquan, bikini, gazebo, Lucy, Skittles, 2 seconds, I can't breathe, traffic stop, dashboard cam, 16 times. His dead body lay in the street in the August heat for 4 hours. He was jogging, was hunted down, cornered by a pickup truck, shot 3 times. One of the men who murdered him leaned over his body and said a terrible thing. I can't breathe. Again, 9 minutes and 29 seconds of a knee and full weight on his neck. I can't breathe. The kids got shot and the grown-ups got shot, which is to say the kids watched their peers shot down and their parents' generation get gunned down and beat down and terrorized as well. The agglomerating spectacle continues. Here are a few we know less well. Danny Ray Thomas, Johnny Jermaine Rush, Nania Kane, Dejuan Hall, Tatiana Jefferson, Demetrius Bryan Hollins, Jacqueline Craig and her children, and then the iconic Alton Sterling, Eric Garner, Sandra Bland, Walter Scott, Breonna Taylor, Philando Castile. Ashe, 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 ashe. They watch these violations up close and on their cell phones so many times over. The stories were the ground soil of their rage. The stories instructed them that anti-black hatred and violence were never far. This is the generation of my sons and their friends and the university students I've taught, and the generation of Darnella Frazier, the 17-year-old Minneapolis girl who came upon George Floyd's murder in progress while on an everyday run with her cousin to the corner store, filmed it on her phone, and posted it on her Facebook page at 1:46 a.m. with the caption, "They killed him right in front of Cup Foods over South on 38th in Chicago. No type of sympathy, police brutality." 17 years old, witnessing a murder in close proximity, making a record, filming the police that would have worldwide impact, returned the following day to the scene of the crime. She possessed the language to say precisely through tears, "It's so traumatizing." I believed I could keep my sons alive by loving them, believed in the magical powers of complete adoration and a love ethic that would permeate their lives. My love was armor when they was small. My love was armor when their father died of a heart attack when they were 12 and 13. They think black men only die when they got shot, my older son said in the aftermath. My love was armor when that same year our community's block watch sent emails warning residents about 2 black kids on bicycles and praising neighbors who had called the police on them. My love for my children said, "Move." My love said, "Follow your sons," when they ran into the dark streets of New York to join protesters after Eric Garner's killer was acquitted. When my sons were in high school and pictures of Philando Castile were on the front page of the Times, I wanted to burn all the newspapers so they would not see the gun coming in the window, the blood on Castile's face, the terror in his partner's face, and the eyes of his witnessing baby girl. But I was too late generationally, because they were not looking at newspaper. They were looking at their phones, where the image was a house of mirrors straight to hell. My love was both rational and fantastical. Can I protect my sons from being demonized? Can I keep them from moving free? But they must be able to move as free as wind. If I listen to their fears, will I comfort them? If I share my fears, will I frighten them? Will racism and fear disable them? If we ignore it, will it all go away? Will dealing with race fill their mind like stones and block them from thinking of a million other things? Let's be clear about what motherhood is. A being comes onto this earth, and you are charged with keeping it alive. If it dies if you do not tend it. It's as simple as that. No matter how intellectual and multicolored motherhood becomes as children grow older, the part that says, "My purpose on earth is to keep you alive," has never totally dissipated. Magical thinking on all sides. So I wanted to go deep into that as well, and I'm aware, even as I share and I read. I want to bring us all into that witnessing, because it hasn't gone away.
One of the things you impress upon us in this book is that all of the violence is not of the kind you just read. There's also the violence that is old, a part of our history. And one of the things you remind us of is the violence of book banning, which is not new. And you recall an incident, a saga, an attack, back in the 60s, a history book written by John Hope Franklin. And the rhetoric of that day is the same as today, yes, in the efforts to successfully ban the book of your sister poet, Amanda Gorman. And the rhetoric from the 60s was, this is a terrible thing, this history book is terrible because it will make white children feel guilty. It will destroy their pride in America. Will you say something about that sort of violence that we are seeing resurge today?
Thank you so much for asking about that. And so that chapter, which talks about a textbook that, I'll say our greatest American historian, John Hope Franklin. We know from Slavery to Freedom, of course, but he was commissioned by the state of California to write an American history book that would tell all of our history in the way in which, we're in this boat together. And as he was working on the book, there was a full-on book banning campaign against him. He was called a communist. He was... The book eventually prevailed, but school boards, everything that we're seeing now happened in the mid-1960s to the great John Hope Franklin. And I think that what remains in there, this idea of school children feeling guilty, one thing I can say as an educator is that white people feel pissed off that they've been lied to all this time. That's what I find in the classroom all the time. People should be pissed off that they've been lied to. And when people are given the tools and critical thinking to be able to understand how things have come to become the way they are, to understand fundamental American myths, right? Of, I did it myself. I did it with, who built this land, right? Whose land is this? To be able to ask those questions empowers all of us to live in this multicultural democracy with each other, which is what we all, have to try to do. DeSantism had not begun at that point when I wrote this, and I call it ism because it's not just him. He's just like the biggest, most public exemplar of that racist ignorance and hatred and misuse of state power. but it's everywhere. And I'm glad that actually this, I hope, will be useful to a contemporary conversation about book banning, to understand it didn't just spring out of nowhere.
Let me bring us to a close so that we do have time for those questions by assuring everyone that the answer to the question, do I really believe that cultural expression can somehow shape a world where our children are safe? You end up believing it, because Elizabeth, as she continues through the book, answers that in a very strong affirmative. And I just want to say that you will also be, and I began reading the book with that being a very big question. Does she really believe that? And but she does, and she persuades us that artists are the visionaries who can help us imagine the world we want to live in and the world that we can create together. You end with hope, with an exhortation in the sparse, powerful words of a poet, a mother, scholar, citizen. Would you read the very last sentence? Just left me with everything.
Yes.
Would you read that, please?
Yes.
And then we'll have questions.
Yes. And I should also say, I wish we had a screen in back of us, but what I'm proudest of with this book is there is beautifully reproduced work by mostly African American artists that is not illustrative of the book, but a part of the book itself, a conversation with the book. So this is Carrie Mae Weems's extraordinary Blue-Black Boy on the cover, Jordan Casteel's Galen. There are Charles White, banner for Willie J. So I mean for you to read the book, look at the pictures, have a conversation, let it have a conversation with you. And that's part of, and I say, artists make radical solutions all day long, soup from a stone, beauty from thin air. We see and try and discard and see again. We vision, we discard, we invent, we do it in the dark, we bring it into community. Artists continue to generate in a dangerous world that is nonetheless overflowing with life force and power, creativity, making, and imagining. Animate Black self-determination with that which only culture can provide. And to the last line, there is no North Star without vigorous creativity to imagine it for us and mark where it lights the way.
So please, I know there are people who got up to talk with Elizabeth. Please come to the microphones. Don't be shy.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know what. Hello? Hi.
Hi.
I also come out of the field of philanthropy and have worked both on the arts and culture side and the gun violent youth prevention side. And I'm curious as to what Mellon, I've worked with Mellon before, what Mellon might be doing beyond arts and culture and the creative side of the business to deal with the trauma, because the trauma is very, very deep. And
yeah, so thanks for that question. And we believe, and the corner of the street that we are working is arts, culture, humanity, libraries, higher education, education in prison. That's what we do, but now we do it through a social justice lens. And so actually we believe that in those forms are the answers that we can fund to the trauma. Our biggest, most recent initiative is called Imagining Freedom, where we've put $150 million to thinking about the larger question of storytelling in the form of arts scholarship with people who are affected by incarceration. People inside, people outside, deliberately designed for there to be a porosity between inside and outside. And so that is really how I believe. Again, there are many ways that people process trauma in the area of the foundation's expertise, we believe that culture is a way to do that, and not only to process trauma, but also to say who we are, to show each other the humanity that is most powerfully, I think, contained in our creativity, so that we can actually see each other, especially in the instance of mass incarceration, people who are deliberately, physically put and meant to be out of view forever and ever and ever.
Next question over here.
Thank you. Dr. Alexander, thank you. Could you share some of what you've heard from young Black men in response to your work?
Yeah, thank you for that. So while I start, the majority of the cases that I reference are young Black men, but I also do talk about Black girls and young women and the kind of racist violence that they are subjected to as well. So I just want to say that young Black people, and it's been very moving. I mean, because I make an effort to do readings in places where I will have a chance to talk with them. They have a lot to add. They feel opened up. They feel seen. They sometimes don't want to talk. And I think that that's an interesting thing that we all deal with, right? Is like the litany is so extreme. And again, we are trying to, I have a section where I talk about my sons and their friends just dancing. Like just dancing, just being free and having some joy in this damn life. I think of Toni Morrison, racism, and how I would turn that to racism and racist violence are designed to keep you distracted, to keep you from doing your work. So there are some young people who don't want to talk about it anymore. But I hope that they've heard or know that, this is human and palm-sized on purpose. There's something you can tuck in and take with you that will hopefully catalyze other conversations. And partly why also I wanted the art in there is I wanted to be able to experience without the unavoidability of the facts of the words, spaces that are, the Jordan Castile I showed you, Galen, is a green. He's a naked figure. He's not being spectated. He's not being fetishized. He's an impossible and beautiful color. So there's so much to feel when you look at that. There's a Rob Pruitt where a Black man is covered with stars. What do you feel when you look at that? When my very beloved father, who passed last summer but had a chance to see this book, he looked at this and he did this. And he said, he's so beautiful. He's so sad. And we have to love him. And that was not about the words, but about the image. So I like to also, when I see young people, just give them. So even if the conversation doesn't happen with me, it's something that happens in community. But overwhelmingly, that like they say yes. Yeah.
Another question? Do we have time?
Okay.
I'm going to try. Okay, this is a direct question, but I have to set a tiny little table. I also do not believe in the concept of other people's children and have lived my life accordingly. My question has to do with this reactionary view that if we share the truth of history, white children will feel guilty. We know that guilt, shame are primal emotions. Whether you believe in Jesus or you believe in Freud, they are primal emotions. How can we put into action a way of working with that so that it doesn't stop there, so that we understand that we're actually giving people choices to make the world better, and that kids, if you tell them what is, they can deal with it. If you tell them the truth, they can deal with it. How can we?
I think we just keep doing it, and I think we also reject the absurd premise of the assertion, that white children will feel guilty. I mean, it's an absurd premise. It's a distraction to the conversation. I've seen some wonderful things that also say, that show pictures of Black children, desegregating schools, having white people spitting at them, is saying like, well, how do you think they'll feel when they look at that? let's just have empathy for everybody and tell the truth, and don't go down the rabbit hole of the stupid and deliberately distracting concerns that keep us from the heart of connecting with each other and seeing everybody in their full humanity. Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our author and moderator. And as I said before, our books are on sale and directly behind us in the book sales tent. And Dr. Alexander will be signing books in the signing tent for the next 30 minutes. So next up, and just